Alaska erases the road in white. I stand at the frosted window, breath making small moons on the glass. By the door waits one suitcase, zippers shut, wheels quiet, ready to argue with ice. On the table, a note sits like a verdict: leave, alone. The generator coughs, thinks better of it, coughs again. The wall clock stalls between seconds as if time can skid. My phone shows no service. Outside, snow climbs the steps like a warning with mittens on. I have a rule older than most storms: never travel at night. Night hides ditches, invites, bargains, steals names, but the note is here, and the wind has opinions, and a truck might not pass this way until noon. I touch the suitcase handle and feel the cold walk into my bones. The floor remembers years I waited instead of ran. I count to 10, as nurses teach. I listen for the sound inside my ribs that never lied. If I go now, I might arrive fast and wrong. If I stay, I might arrive late and whole. I set my hand on the suitcase handle and said to the storm, if this is truth, it will stand at dawn. Sweetheart, pull your chair close. Tonight we're talking about Alaska snow, one suitcase, and the word that almost broke this house. I'll pour the tea. You bring your patience. We'll walk it slow, with light on the paper, and truth keeping pace. If stories like this steady your heart, tap, subscribe, and stay with me. I tell one every Sunday. If you believe families deserve words spoken plain, not shouted, pressed like so this porch light reaches another house, I won't ask for applause. I'll ask for company, because courage grows better when it eats with someone. You'll hear how a rule no decisions at night kept me from driving into a storm, wearing someone else's hurry. You'll hear how daylight turned strangers into witnesses, and a note into a lesson we could live with. Before you judge that note, you need to know what winter used to mean in this home. Evening in Alaska comes with instructions my body knows by heart. I tilt the lamp a finger's width so the light slides warm across the table and leaves the corners honest. I bank the stove until it purrs instead of shouts. Steam ghosts the window. I lay 2 bowls, because hands remember before memory does. The spoon ticks, the rim, a small bell for company. Then I stop, breathe, and put 1 bowl back on the shelf. Habit longs for togetherness. Boundary loves the person who is here. The weather radio mutters advisories, in a voice that never learned surprise. Wind 20, gusts 30, blowing snow, visibility less than a quarter mile. I could recite along, if I had to. My rule: lives where ribs keep their secrets. No night decisions. I learned it the expensive way. Night hides ditches and makes bargains that daylight will not honor. So I keep a creed in pencil inside the bread tin. Daylight decides. I touch that lid like a brimmed hat. It nods back. I set the phone face down beside the tin because screens can turn moonlight into trouble. I line wool socks along the stove rail, stripes facing the same direction so I know chaos has not won. I ladle soup, the kind that forgives imprecision. Potatoes admit what they are. Carrots do not pretend. Salt tells the truth without speeches. I sit, listen to the house, and let the steam baptize my face. Outside, thick cloud swallows the aurora. The sky would be dancing if it had breath to spare. Plow berms rise like white shoulders along the road. Somewhere, a raven laughs at our weather. A neighbor's truck passes slow, then doubles back, light smearing on ice, as if time tried to change its mind. I lift my chin toward the window, a nod across the drift. The truck moves on, undecided. I.e. with measured patience, then wash the single bowl because finishing matters. The empty place on the table is not a wound. It is a porch for tomorrow. I dry the bowl and set it upside down on the towel, a small roof of order. I check the latch, not from fear but from respect. I throw another log on the fire and thank the tree for remembering me. The weather radio repeats itself the way storms do. I let its list of cautions braid with mine. No night decisions. No pressure at this table. No disrespect where we bless food. If a knock comes, the porch light will hear it first. If a note appears, the tin will keep it company until morning. These are the rules that turn panic into posture. I sit again and warm my hands around the kettle. I think of other winters, other crossings, the time the trail disappeared and patience found it again by waiting. I would rather feel foolish for staying than be reckless for leaving. The wind shoulders the eaves, the stove purrs. My rule keeps its coat on. That rule saved me once, and tonight, the snow asked me to break it. I open the bread tin and check the papers. Birth certificates in plastic sleeves, an old union card with a crease where hope folded, a list of numbers I can dial when the world remembers to be reachable. On a square of index card, My handwriting leans steady. Daylight decides. Below it, smaller. Breathe first, then choose. I slide the card back and close the lid. The same way you quiet a baby who decided to sleep. The generator coughs once and catches. I set the kettle. Through the frost feathering the pane, I see the drift taking one step at a time toward the porch. Snow climbs like a polite guest who cannot resist insisting. I straighten my back so the house can copy me. I place a candle on the sill tonight. I was raised below these latitudes where winter meant wet, not white. Mornings smelled like percolator coffee and bus diesel, and news traveled by casserole before it reached a headline. Our small house sat 3 doors from the church and 1 block from the Union Hall. So Sunday taught reverence and Monday taught receipts. In the church basement, pies lined the tables like a parade of grandmothers. And somebody always prayed too loud, and we loved them for it. At the hall, people in work shirts spoke the grammar of fairness hours, safety, names signed in ink. After school I wiped chrome at the diner until I could see my future in it, plain and steady. Teachers graded papers over meatloaf. Truckers tipped $1 and a story. Mr. Fenn at the hardware taught me the price of nails and the cost of care. How dust on a shelf tells you whether hands have been busy. American life sounded like wrenches, choir rehearsals on AM radio, and the plant whistle when shifts changed. I learned to count change without looking and to listen with both ears. He arrived on a Tuesday, with sawdust on his jacket and patience in his posture. He ordered coffee black and said thank you like a handshake. A week later, he fixed the sticky bell above the diner door and left a note the size of a compliment. Call if it sticks again. The bell behaved. So did my heart, most days. We courted with coins and ordinary weather, 1 milkshake, 2 straws, a jukebox that needed a friendly thump. We walked home slow enough to hear our shoes agree with the sidewalk. He respected silence and kept receipts folded square. When the mill cut shifts, we looked north the way birds do when instinct is louder than habit. Alaska sounded like work with a view and air that tells the truth, even when it stings. We packed dishes that never chipped, a radio that knew our stations, and the rule I had begun to carry: decide in daylight. The bus rolled past miles of maybe. On the ferry, fishermen taught me knots and stories, both held if tied correctly. We found a rental with a stove that rattled and a window that bragged. Our breath learned new shapes. Settlement, life taught, barter, and neighbor chains. Your ladder for my sander. A ride for a pie, mittens for a promise to show up next time. We studied the science of staying warm, how to bank a fire, how to angle plywood against stubborn wind, how to read the sky for intentions. The store clerk knew everyone's last name and the one they hid behind a shrug. The table became our altar. Bills slid beneath the salt. Prayers went between bites. News, good, bad, undecided, was spoken in full sentences so nobody had to translate mood. On Sundays, we ate soup that tasted like thrift and victory. On weekdays, we fixed and mended and learned what breaks from use and what breaks from neglect. He kept receipts because memory is good company until a bill arrives. I kept a pencil in the bread tin and wrote dates beside decisions like a witness on duty. The northern lights taught me that beauty can be quiet and still move a sky. The first real snow taught discipline. Stack wood early, line boots by the door, mind the forecast but mind your neighbor more. We built a life that creaked kindly under our feet and warmed from the inside out. We promised to meet at supper always, until the night supper learned how to wait, always. Marriage began in a rented, upstairs walk-up that creaked kindly under our feet. We painted the kitchen the color of warm bread, and set the table with thrift store bowls that looked braver together than alone. Paydays smelled like soap and gasoline. Thrift wasn't misery. It was a game we played against the month, and some weeks we won by pennies. We learned the seasons of a northern house. Stack wood early, lay kindling dry, keep boots by the door, with laces open like hands. Fish in the smoker taught patience. Winter made summer honest. Summer repaid the debt with light. The baby arrived, red as sunrise and loud as joy. Laughter cashed the bigger checks. We measured growth on a doorframe and measured ourselves against patience. He kissed the soft crown before leaving, and again when he returned. And I built routines sturdy enough to carry 3. Supper was our bell. Whatever the day took, we gathered when it rang. Then, a hairline cracked. A job ran long. A truck fought its gears. A favor for a neighbor took the long way home. He'd call late and say, "Don't wait up." I'd answer, "We'll re." At first, the bowl kept its heat like a loyal dog. Later, It cooled while I told the child a story, and told myself another. Kindness can warm what lateness chills. Small confusions collected like lint, a promise a reason trimmed for ease, a missing detail framed as protection. He said it spared me worry. I said I preferred true worry over false peace. We practiced restraint, which is quieter and harder. I learned to listen for the shape of truth, not only its words. He learned that silence has weight. One winter evening the stew went slick with the skin, while the clock tugged at its hands. I spooned a bowl, covered the rest, and held the baby until the house accepted we were done for the night. He arrived after the lamps, patience thinned, apology genuine, explanation light. Another week it happened again. Habit is a craftsman. It builds whatever you feed it. I counted quiet like coins and laid a rule along the grain. No pressure after dark. No signatures in a hurry. No disrespect where we bless food. I taped it to my ribs where promises live. Mercy made room, and math told the truth. I cleared the table and set only what we could carry without breaking. We ate, spoke plain, and let time earn its way back. The house kept our vow even when we were tired. The first empty bowl taught me mercy. The second taught me math. Together, dusk fell like a curtain no one asked for, and the storm began loading the roof with slow, heavy hands. I heard the generator cough, regain its breath, and cough again. I turned the lamp down so the fuel would last, and laid my mittens to dry like two small animals recovering. When I opened the door to fetch wood, a folded square lay on the mat under the latch we share with family. It was the kind of folding that says, private more than polite. The key we passed between us had been pushed back through the slit, as if it didn't want to be responsible for whatever the paper contained. I brought both inside and closed the door against the night that had learned how to lean. I set the wood, peeled the wet from my coat, and unfolded the paper at the table where truth usually takes a chair. One word, in a hand I know, leave. The timing was cruel, even for weather. The neighbor had gone to town for feed and wouldn't be back before morning. The plow might pass or might sit stubborn in a drift. My phone showed no service, as if the sky had chosen silence on purpose. I boiled water because heat steadies thought, then held the note up to the window. The snow was falling with that private insistence it gets right before a road disappears. I put the note down and made myself read it again. As if repetition could add verbs, it forgot. A voicemail waited from earlier, caught while I still had bars at noon. The machine spoke in a voice with shine on it. Bank or clinic or attorney paperwork already prepared, decisions already taken, signatures to be gathered for efficiency. I pressed the phone to my ear and listened to the kind of helpful that saves time by spending your name. Consent presumed. I set the phone face down because I wanted to see the house, not a rectangle asking for ATHUMBPRINT. Pulled closer. The stove thumped and the window breathed frost from the edges and I checked the lock from habit and respect. The note sat beside the bread tin, like a dare with mittens on. I remembered other nights when I mistook urgency for love and hurry for help. I remembered the ditch we slid into once because this guy told us it would be fine until the moment it wasn't. I promised myself after that to obey the road's mood, not mine. Wind pressed its shoulder to the siding. I set one bowl on the table, then put it back because tonight was not a night for pretending company. I opened the bread tin and touched the penciled creed, daylight decides. The letters steadied. I breathed the way nurses taught me when counting to 10 had to be an activity, not advice. I do not make permanent choices in temporary weather. I do not leave because paper forgot manners. The generator coughed again and steadied like a stubborn heart. I lit a second candle so the room could see me stand up straight. Then I faced the door that wanted a story about courage and gave it the truth about wisdom. I waited there. The message wanted my name to Knighton, their terms. The phone found a way to ring, even when the bars were shy. A voice from town wore a smile you could hear and asked if I might brave the road. Just a quick trip, just a few signatures to keep things moving. I told him the plow had not been by since noon, and the wind had decided to supervise. He said they could send someone in a pickup. I said, pickups slide too. The pause that followed measured both our patience. He pivoted to kindness that sounded like choreography. We'll make it easy. Easy is a word that often asks dignity to wait in the truck. I thanked him and repeated the rule I pay for with good sleep. No night decisions. No night travel. Not at my table. After I hung up, the weather radio scolded the highway by name. The stove thumped. The rafters remembered every winter at once. I set a kettle because water understands stubbornness. A text from a relative arrived an hour later, when the sky tried a lighter shade of gray. Be reasonable, it read. A sentence that acts like it is carrying groceries but wants your keys. Another message followed with links that promise convenience, if you let your thumb do the thinking. I turned the screen face down and opened the bread tin so my hands could touch something that has never lied. Daylight decides, the pencil said, still sure of itself. I felt my back lengthen the way a fence post finds plumb. The world shrank to stove, table, window. In small towns, news moves faster than plows. I could feel eyes behind curtains taking attendance of my porch. The phone rang again. This one from the clinic, polite as Sunday clothes. It's routine, she promised. Routines are just habits with clean shirts. I asked for a daylight appointment, a room with windows, and a copy I could carry home. She said she could email. I said paper keeps better in cold weather. After we hung up, I set out 2 bowls from muscle memory, staggered by a craving for another pair of hands across from mine. Then I remembered what memory sometimes forgets. Company is not the same as counsel. I put 1 bowl back and felt the quiet approve. A cousin's cousin sent a screenshot of a deadline with a thumb up as if that were help. I swept the threshold, an old trick for clearing worry. Snow insisted. I insisted back. I brewed tea and let the leaves decide their own pace. I thought of the note on the mat, of the key pushed back through, of the years I used to spend my evenings fixing what daylight could have prevented. The phone rang a 3rd time, the voice more direct now. We truly need your signature tonight, I said. If you truly needed it tonight, you would have come by daylight. He tried a laugh that wanted to be a lever. I gave him silence that wanted to be a wall. Outside, the plow did not appear. Inside, resolve did. I breathed slow and counted 10, twice over. I wiped the table as if a meeting were scheduled with my better self. I set 1 bowl down, then took it back. This table would not be a courtroom. My friend Mara knocked with the rhythm of a person who has rehearsed speeches. I let her in, shook the frost from her hood, and handed her a towel for the melt. She scanned the kitchen like a detective who loves me but doesn't trust my answers. You're still here, she said, eyes darting to the suitcase by the door, and the note anchored under the bread tin. I'm still here, I said, which is not the same as stalled. She pressed her lips tight. If you loved him, you'd just go. The road is passable if you hugged the center. They need this now. I poured tea because heat can shave edges off hard sentences. If it can't wait for daylight, it wants something other than care, I said. She opened her phone like a prayer book and scrolled through messages, screenshots, links, a map. See, it's just a signature, and the bank closes early in weather. My name is not a snowplow, I said. It doesn't go out because someone else didn't plan. Her mouth made that little sorrowed shape I know, from years when I was the one apologizing for existing. You used to be easier. For who? I asked. We let the question stand between us like a coat rack holding coats that don't fit anymore. I told her about the nights I drove icy roads to patch someone else's haste. The mornings I found that panic is a poor carpenter. I told her about the ditch, about the baby in back, about the way regret takes up a whole table and still won't eat. Mara's gaze softened and then bristled again, the way a spruce bends to wind and then snaps back. But what if waiting makes everything worse? She said. Waiting makes daylight, I answered. Daylight makes witnesses. My phone, stubborn, showed no service, which is sometimes a blessing in plain clothes. Mara stood to pace. Do you want me to drive you? She asked, hope and frustration braided tight. I want you to sit, I said, patting the chair that has listened to more confessions than a booth. I want the storm to finish its paragraph. She sat with the resistance of a person learning a new muscle. We sipped. We watched the window think. She tried scripture without context and stories without receipts. I just don't want you to regret it, she whispered. I won't, I said, voice steady because I borrowed it from the rule in my ribs. I regret the times I disappeared to keep peace. I'm not vanishing tonight. We cleaned the mugs without hurry. She pulled her hat down, kissed my cheek like a sister who's angry at the same weather, and told me to call when the lines woke up. Outside, the plow grumbled somewhere distant, then fell silent again, like a promise that remembered its limits in ice. After the door sighed shut, I stood alone and listened to the house hold me. The wind changed pitch and found a seam in the siding. I smoothed the paper on the counter, pressed the crease with my thumb, and chose to fold it again, smaller, like a child who needs gentleness to sleep. Truly, I folded the note once, then heard boots on the porch over the wind. Asterisk, the knock landed heavy, the way men knock when they bring a truck idling in the drive and a decision idling in their throat. I opened the door to the chain, then the width courtesy requires. Snow swirled in like it had an invitation. He stamped his boots and held a manila envelope close to his parka, as if paper could catch cold. "We have to go," he said. "Not mean, just marching. Deadlines, roads are worse by morning. Sign what you can now, and we'll finish the rest in town." I stepped aside just enough to offer heat and a chair. "Water?" I asked. He declined the glass and glanced at the suitcase like it ought to salute. He set the envelope on the edge of the table, one corner hanging over like a dare. "You don't have to read it all," he said. "It's standard. They'll fix details later." "Later is where houses lose their names," I answered. "Sit, warm up. Tell me what you know in sentences I can repeat to a clerk." He exhaled, half laugh, half fog. "They said you'd be difficult." "I am careful," I said. "Careful wears the same coat every winter." He paced 3 steps, then to Boft, as though measuring the room for surrender. The envelope looked smaller when I moved it near the lamp where paper grows honest. He opened with fear. "If we missed this, the claim could vanish. Fees go up by the hour. People will talk." "People are already talking," I said, "and fees climb best in the dark. We will not feed them." He tried family next. The kind of love that shows up loud. "Do it for him. Do it for all of us." I said, I am doing it for the part of us that has to live here tomorrow." He reached for sympathy, then for frustration, then for the envelope again. I slid it farther from the edge. "Read me the line where I surrender appeal," I said. He couldn't find it because it was written sideways, the way traps often are. Snow hissed against the steps. I set another log on the fire and let the house choose warmth over drama. "We don't have time for this," he said. "We have time for the rest of our lives," I said. "We have time to bring this into daylight." He tried to pick up the pen I had not offered. I offered the porch-light instead. "Tomorrow, room with windows, witnesses, copies we carry out, apology in writing for the rush." He flinched at the last item, as if the word apology had teeth. "That's not necessary." "Then it won't cost you much to grant it," I said. He lifted the envelope again. I put my palm on the table where names have been kept safe. "Leave the papers," I said. "Leave the keys in the bowl. Drive home. Sleep. We will not die because we waited." He stared like a man reading a language he once knew. Anger tried the doorknob and failed to come in. The room did a miracle and held. His hand moved toward the papers with the muscle memory of habit. My hand moved toward the wall with the muscle memory of hope. He reached for the papers. I reached for the switch light chose for us. By morning, the storm had not left. It had simply organized itself, like a committee that discovered bylaws overnight. The road shoulders were white walls, the sky a blank form asking for nothing. The plow rattled past at 8, raised a polite ridge, and disappeared to rescue the next mile. Inside, the envelope waited with the patience of paper and the impertinence of a timer. A fresh message arrived once the bars returned. "Dressed in authority and deadlines. 48 hours. Roads permitting. Lost claim. Delayed care. Fees," in a column that likes to grow. I brewed coffee and read every line aloud. There it was again, dressed in softer words. Consent inferred by silence. Appeal waived by convenience. Risk shifted to the name easiest to I circled verbs. I underlined quiet traps. I wrote no note in the margin where flattery tried to be a policy. The town watched from warm windows. At the post office, a hello held me 1 beat too long. At the store, someone asked if I was managing, which is a soup of 3 different spices. Online cousins became forecasters with opinions about both weather and character. I called the number on the letter. My voice was the temperature of a lake that has decided to freeze. "Daylight meeting," I said. "Neutral room. Witnesses with pens. Corrected pages. Apology in writing for the rush. Public notes so rumor can sit down." The man on the line shifted into a tone that believes itself kind. "We scheduled noon. After I hung up, another message bloomed, this one from family. It wore urgency like cologne. "Please just sign the first page to show good faith. We can fix later." I have met later. It likes to forget you. I placed my palm on the table so my body could remind my mouth what we believe. The clock kept decent time. I copied my plan in neat block letters, rules, receipts, grace. I added the index card on top like a blessing with sharp corners. Outside, wind threw powder across the road the way gossip throws. Guesses across a room. A neighbor texted, "Roads open for now." for now is a promise with short legs. I thanked her and stayed put. Another ping, a warning about penalties if I delayed, a friendly reminder that these things get expensive. I have been poor enough to recognize how fear of fees can rent your backbone. I paid once. I don't rent it anymore. I set 2 chairs by the window and imagined them full of witnesses who would not try to be authors. I practiced the sentence that keeps a house upright. Not at night. Not in a hurry. Not with my name. The clock said there was still time to sprint. Still time to apologize to the ditch for visiting. My stomach could not and call it prudence. I chose stillness over spectacle. The house agreed, quietly. Today, I set the kettle, turned the phone face down, and let the tea choose patience leaf by leaf. If I am judged for waiting, I can live with the evidence. If I am judged for hurrying, I will be the one who has to live with the wreck. If I wait, they'll call me cruel. If I don't, I'll call myself something worse. Daylight steadied the room the way a hand steadies a ladder. The heater rattled like a loyal old friend clearing its throat. I chose the table nearest the window and set down my folder. The pastor arrived with his hat in both hands, said he would pray with his eyes open, and sat. The clerk followed, pen behind her ear, winter boots squeaking their way toward honesty. We took attendance. Paper, people, light. I slid the envelope across like bread you plan to share. We read aloud, slow enough that verbs had to behave. The first clause smiled with borrowed teeth. If no objection appears within a reasonable time, consent may be inferred. Reasonable to whom? The second clause promised speed, then charged my future for it. Relief now, appeal forfeited later. The third tucked risk under a friendly blanket and pushed it to my side of the bed. The clerk tapped her pen against the margin and said, softly, convenient. The pastor's breath said amen without words. I laid out my counters, times, the voicemail transcript, a copy of minutes that existed in my kitchen but not in their folder. The clerk compared headers like a detective who prefers facts to drama. Missing lines showed up under daylight the way footprints show up after the wind stops bragging. I felt the tremor that used to run my hands try to return. It found no purchase. Daylight stood behind me like a tall relative. I have been called stubborn by people who confused patience with defiance. That word did not fit in this room. What fit was careful. Night had tried to spend my steadiness like loose change. Morning counted it back, coin by coin. I turned the document and showed where a friendly may should be a dutiful shall. I circled, deemed, and wrote. Agreed, circled, assumed, and wrote. Documented. The pastor nodded the way men nod when they hear plum. We paused for coffee that tasted like prudence. Outside, a truck downshifted. Inside, the heater found its rhythm. I drafted a humane alternative in print, neat enough for strangers. Decisions in daylight. Witnesses present. Appeal preserved. Risk shared. Care continued now with no midnight traps. Payments routed cleanly. No strings hiding in bows. An apology in writing, not to humiliate anyone, but to teach the room how repair becomes real. A public notice, because rumor eats in the dark, and truth prefers breakfast. The clerk read the alternative twice, then said, "This is cleaner." The pastor said, "This will preach," which is how he signs things without ink. I initialed the margins we would request, and underlined the lines I would not live without. We photocopied the marked pages, placed one copy in my folder, one in the clerk's, and one in front of the empty chair where Prussia had intended to sit. I looked out through the window. The sky had the pale blue of paper that hasn't been written on yet. I could see where the drift ended and the road began again. That is what daylight does. It separates demand from duty, noise from name. I thanked the witnesses for spending their morning where verbs matter. The clerk squared the stack and said, "You were right to wait." The pastor put on his hat and smiled like a sunrise had just remembered its job. I stood, spine taller than worry, and slid the folder under my arm. I did not sign off yet. First, we would make their paper match our language. Then we would let ink mean something again. What they called urgency was a shortcut around my dignity. We set the meeting for noon, a room with windows and a copier that works. And I left, carrying the kind of quiet that holds. I climbed the attic ladder slow. The way you climb into a memory you intend to use. The cedar box waited under a quilt, tape label lifting at the corners. Dust-like soft counsel. Inside, fuel logs penciled in my square hand, union minutes from winters that taught us the price of heat, bank statements with stamps, and envelopes of saved receipts that never seemed important until now. On the table I spread proof like a map. Fuel deliveries dated, gallons tallied, signatures lined up like fence posts, the union minutes where a motion was tabled publicly then quietly skipped in their copy, timestamps from my calls, the voicemail transcript, text threads where my no was plain and their hurry got louder, the clerk's duplicate of the missing page. I added the note I keep in the bread tin in his handwriting. If you must stand alone, stand at our table. I will recognize you there. Each ask spent a relationship chip. I called the retired dispatcher who remembers which trucks actually ran those nights. He sighed, confirmed the route, and said he wished people wrote things down the first time. I phoned a cousin who hates conflict but loves arithmetic. She cross-checked figures like she was mending. I brought the church secretary a pie and left with the original minutes, edges warm from the copier. I texted Mara to thank her for yesterday's stubborn company. She answered with a heart that looked like it had walked through wind. The sky cleared until mountains remembered their names. The work did not shrink. I scanned, labeled, stacked. I wrote a plain English summary a tired person could follow without tripping. I stapled the humane alternative on top: daylight meeting, neutral room, witnesses, corrected agreement, written apology, public acknowledgement, clean routing, appeal alive. The printer groaned and obeyed. The kettle clicked and rested. A fresh message landed with a softer voice. One signature today would unlock everything. I have unlocked enough to know some rooms charge rent you never intended to pay. I set both hands on the folder and felt paper hold like a good beam. My eye caught the cedar box again, and an older envelope tucked flat beneath the logs list. It was his, dated the week we learned the ditches lesson. Inside, a line written twice, as if he had needed the practice. Slow is not refusal. Slow is repair. I breathed, the way nurses teach. I put that line on top of the stack like a prayer you can carry. Noon would come, and with it faces, pens, a heater that rattles, and light that shows where ink ends and intent begins. I zipped my coat, slid the folder into my bag, and whispered the math of the day. Courage spent carefully buys tomorrow. One signature could end this. Or end me. I chose paper, witnesses, and walking shoes with good tread. The ultimatum arrived, wearing perfume. Today or never. I set the phone face down and used a mug as a paperweight for panic. The mug did not spill. Neither would I. An email followed. Low voice. Neat bullet points. Quiet settlement in exchange for speed. A smaller number with a larger silence. Quiet has cost me double before. I wrote back. Daylight only. Witnesses present. Correct the paper, or correct your aim. Rumor went out for a walk. At the store, someone's greetings stayed an extra beat, like a hand that doesn't know where to rest. Online, cousins of cousins auditioned as judges. A tidy story grew legs. I was holding up care. Another, I had come into money and decided to hoard dignity as a hobby. I read until reading became rehearsal for arguments I would never stage, then closed the lid and let the house be louder than the noise beyond it. Family tried diplomacy shaped like a leash. Let's keep it in the family, they said, which is a sentence that has been used to store too many unsolved things. Sign, and we'll smooth the rest. Moving on and moving right are not the same verb. I answered in my steady voice. A boundary is not an accusation. It is how love stays trustworthy. I set the table for one and practiced compassion as a discipline. I named the fear behind their rush. I named the fatigue behind their scolding. I forgave the part that wanted relief more than repair. Compassion without surrender tastes like good bread. It fills you enough to refuse dessert you didn't order. The pastor texted, seat saved. The clerk wrote, draft almost clean. Mara sent a photo of her car keys ride. Bridges arrive like that, modest, practical. I said yes. I stacked my order for tomorrow. Rules, receipts, grace. I tucked the pencil note on top like a banner, small enough to fit in a pocket. Evening pressed its face to the window. The mountain war blew the way truth does when it is almost ready to speak. Another message pinged, just the first page to show good faith. Good faith shows itself in daylight and brings witnesses who can spell. I uncapped my pen, not to sign, but to underline the sentence that has kept the roof up, not at night, not in a hurry, not with my name. I sat very still until stillness became a place I could stand. The wind calmed. The heater rattled its blessing. I pictured the room at noon, chairs, copies, hands, light. If they won't sit with grace, I'll sit with God. He keeps ours I can live with. And he prefers the truth written, where people can read it. Tomorrow, then, it was 3 a.m, the hour when houses tell the truth and the refrigerator sings an old hymn. I kept the lamp low and the room honest. Steam climbed from my mug and lost its nerve halfway to heaven. I sat at the table that has learned more about me than any diary and folded my hands the way my mother did when she did not want to shake. Lord, I said without saying it, stand between me and my hurry. The quiet took attendance. The clock ticked, polite as his pipes settled. Wind moved its furniture one room over. I thought of the first night I set only one bowl and felt more peace than loneliness. The way a splinter finally works itself free. I had not meant to choose myself. I had simply kept the soup from thinning into apology. The baby had slept. The room had breathed. I had learned the floorboards of my own heart. I remembered other erasures. The "I'm fine" that meant I am disappearing. The smile I wore so a visitor would not have to face his reflection. The midnight bargains I signed because quiet frightened me. Women practice subtraction long before numbers. We remove pieces of ourselves until the sum looks polite. That winter taught me the math in reverse. Add back an hour, add back a breath, add back a rule you keep even when somebody calls it stubborn. I pulled the bread tin close and spread paper like a map. Yellow pad, blunt pencil, the index card asleep under the salt. I printed my terms in letters that did not blink. Daylight meeting, neutral room, witnesses with pens, corrected agreement with square corners, written apology for the shortcut, dressed as mercy, public acknowledgement so rumor can sit down, clean routing of money without strings hidden in bows. I added 3 small words beneath the list: no midnight decisions. I read the list aloud to the lamp and heard my voice steady. A boundary can be a wall when fear builds it. It becomes a bridge when courage keeps the toll. I poured more water and let the kettle ask its soft question. Are you sure? I answered yes in a language that does not require volume. I am sure I am not the villain in my own kitchen. I am sure patience is not passivity. I am sure daylight is the witness that loves me best. I prayed in sentences the size of seeds. Bless the people pushing, because fear has made them clumsy. Bless the people helping, because loyalty can tire. Bless me to stand kind without moving. Then I let the prayer sit like dough under a towel. The room warmed around it. The wind dropped its shoulders. The stove sighed the way a tired animal does when someone finally believes it. When the first bird cleared its throat, I closed the pencil and placed the list on top of the note, like a quilt across a restless child. I put the second bowl back in the cupboard with ceremonial care. I set one bowl at the place where my hands expected, and I did not apologize to the chair across from me. My chest loosened. The light decided us. At dawn, I set one bowl. It was enough. I breathed like a nurse had taught me, counted to 10 twice, and signed my name in the book of mourning. Outside, the snow line paused as if listening. Inside, resolve set the table. When the clock reached 4, I rose to meet the day's work. Morning made decisions look like furniture, again solid, liftable, worth moving with 2 hands. I called the bank first and asked for a daylight slot in a glass-walled room. I named my witnesses and requested receipts for every promise. The manager tried a tone that keeps carpets feeling important. I answered with the voice I save for stormwarnings.com, specific, already under a doorway. He gave me 10 o'clock. Next I called the attorney. No corridors or handshakes in doorways. Neutral room, windows open, witnesses seated, corrected language, printed before pens on. He suggested convenience. I suggested sunlight. He suggested we keep it quiet. I suggested we keep it honest. We agreed on noon. Conference room B. Copier ready. The pastor answered on the second ring. I'll sit and pray with my eyes open. The clerk texted back a photo of reading glasses. On my way. Mara, who had cooled, then warmed, sent a picture of her keys. Ride. I said yes. Bridges travel best with company. I touched the reporter's number and let my hand rest there. Not a threat, just a tool if bolts refused to turn. I wrote only if needed on the margin and underlined daylight decides. The plow finally carved the ridge at the end of my drive, like cooperation arriving late but sincere. I laid the humane alternative on top of the folder so it would be the first page. Anyone met. By 9:30, the day had a backbone. Bank at 10. Attorney at noon. Pastor and clerk confirmed. Friend at the wheel. I packed water, hard candy, and a pen for courage. I put on the jacket that remembers victories and the boots that do not slip. I placed the note back in the bread tin beneath the penciled creed because even dares need filing. Before I left, I stood at the table and touched the empty place where a second bowl might have gone. I told it what I tell myself when rooms get loud: kindness first. Clarity always, grace when possible, and no signatures after dark. The porch light slept. The sun was enough. The phone buzzed with one more message, wearing bluster like cologne. Today or never. I buttoned my coat, locked the door, and spoke to the handle like a comrade. Today by my terms. Mara's truck idled in the drive, heater complaining, then doing its duty. We drove slow, wheels crisp in the packed snow, shoulders settled because the plan was heavier than fear. The mountains stood up straight. The road kept its word. At the first stop sign, I felt the relief of a person who has already decided. They said today or never. I said today, by my terms. Conference room B tried to look important. Long table like a runway. Blinds yanked high. A heater ticking in the corner as if it had an opinion. Snow slid from boots and made small lakes by the door. I set my folder on the bright wood and chose a chair facing the window. Daylight is my lawyer. Mara sat to my left. The pastor and the clerk took the end seats where silence works best. The bank manager arrived with a professional frown that looked tired of itself. The attorney followed, papers tucked under his arm like a bird. He wanted to keep quiet. "We'll keep this simple," he said. "We'll keep this honest," I answered, and opened the folder. I laid out my timeline the way a baker lays dough, nothing hidden. Everything needed: call log, voicemail transcript, fuel slips proving where I was when they claimed I had agreed. Text threads that showed my no while their hurry grew louder. I slid forward the committee minutes, missing from their file and present in mine. The clerk compared headers, her pen tapping when sentences skipped. The manager's frown loosened. Then we read the letter that wanted to be law. I traced the smiley clause where silence became consent assumed when a reasonable time passed. Reasonable to whoever controlled the clock. I circled the line that surrendered appeal in exchange for speed. I underlined the paragraph that shifted unanticipated outcomes to the person with the smallest share me. The attorney called it standard. I called it slippery. I turned to the clean page I drafted at 3A.m. Same purpose, I said. Clearer verbs. We replaced assumed with documented. We restored appeal so tomorrow still had a voice. We removed any inferred consent. Nothing would be taken from quiet ever again. Payments would be routed cleanly. No strings hiding in bows. Copies for all. Certified before anyone's pen. Stood up. The pastor breathed an amen like a man who has seen plum. The clerk nodded. This reads straight. The manager asked the attorney, "Why wasn't it written like this?" The attorney tried a pleasant shrug that didn't fit the room. "Efficiency," he said. I slid the note from my bread tin across the table so they could see my handwriting. Daylight decides. The room inhaled. We marked revisions in ink that did not shake. The copier grumbled, then obeyed. Snow hissed against the window and melted because light kept watching. The manager traced the restored appeal line with his finger. This should never have been removed. He looked at me. Something like relief traveling through his face. "She's right." The attorney tried one last shortcut. "We can proceed now and file a rider later." "Later," I said, "is where houses lose names and people lose sleep. We will not rent my backbone to the calendar. Fix it first." He folded, the way paper does, under a firm hand. He drafted a written apology, simple, specific, no perfume. He agreed to a public notice so rumor could stop eating. He signed his name like a person who finally remembered his job. A family member came in fast, cheeks wind-bitten, ready to argue a race that had already ended. He scanned the table witnesses, copies, pens. Daylight tanned, sat down, as if the chair had made a decision about him. "Did we win?" he asked. "We can live with it," I said. We signed in an order that honored sense, institution, oversight, witnesses, then me. I wrote my name, trucized, neither apology nor flag. The pastor placed his palm on the page without touching ink, a small blessing for language that finally told the truth. The clerk stamped and stacked, her pen satisfied. I stood and adjusted my coat because dignity wears layers. "One more thing," I said. "The notice." The manager met my eyes. "It will run in tomorrow's paper. Correction, not celebration." He slid a card across. "If anything tilts, call me direct." I tucked the card beside my index note. Snow slipped from the sill. The heater clicked contentment. The attorney cleared his throat and tried for the last time to persuade the room to whisper. "We can make this right publicly or quietly," he said. "Publicly," I answered. The window brightened, as if the sky agreed. We left with pages that spoke plain. The clerk sealed copies. The manager cued the notice with a headline, small enough to fit where truth belongs between. Little League scores, and a bake sale. Funds moved along the route that should have been obvious. The apology road stapled to the corrected draft. Not poetic, just accountable. I carried everything home in a folder that felt heavier with relief than paper. In the kitchen, I set the folder on the table like bread. Lunch tasted like someone remembering how to chew. Relief isn't fireworks. It's soup that stays warm because you stayed. The storm's edges softened. Icicles let go in modest applause. The paper arrived early. The notice printed in black and white without adjectives. An error identified. An agreement corrected. Protections restored. And a pledge to do better. At the market, the cashier slid me a note with my receipt. Proud of you. Ma'am then rang the next customer, as if nothing holy had happened. The librarian paperclipped a fee waiver to a bookmark and winked, for light. I tucked both into the bread tin beside Daylight Decides. Money that had been practicing acrobatics stopped showing off. I paid the bills that had been standing on tiptoe, and scheduled the ones I had put on hold like decent guests. I called the carpenter and asked for a proper repair on the porch step instead of the quick patch that had learned to sag. He leveled it like he meant it. On my way home, I bought red-tipped tulips, because dignity deserves a small parade in a jar. Reconciliations didn't line up like soldiers. They arrived like weather, some light, some late, some not at all. A cousin managed an honest sentence and a wet laugh. I gave her the chair by the window and a napkin for pride. A neighbor waved from his truck, the gesture that replaces a paragraph when men run out of words. Mara came by with lemon bars and a soft apology disguised as want-off. We split one and let the silence rest its boots. The table returned to its vocation. I set 2 bowls the next Sunday because the guest I invited arrived with daylight and a willingness to dry dishes. We spoke in full sentences. There was no theater. Only repair learning its schedule. He said the words you are supposed to say, and the ones that take longer to learn. I accepted the ones that came with receipts, changed behavior, shared paperwork, a promise to ask before assuming. The second bowl can return by invitation. That is not punishment. That is trust with doorframes. Not everyone came back. Arithmetic, not tragedy. Some bonds were twined, some were thread, some were steel disguised as string. I kept the porch light on for people trying, and turned it off for people only trying my patience. The house learned a quieter weather. Even the heater seemed to rattle with a gentler pride, as if metal could remember truth. A week later, after snowplows and small talk had smoothed the edges of town, an envelope arrived, addressed in a familiar hand. No demands, no links, just a single question and a line beneath it. Could we talk at your table? There was a checkmark box, printed small beside the sentence. Yes, in daylight. I smiled at whoever made that form. I set the letter beside the tulips and let them both open at their own speed. A letter arrived later this time asking for a seat, not a signature. Come sit close, sweetheart. This is the part I want you to keep folded in your pocket for rough weather. First, a boundary is a promise you keep to yourself in public. It isn't a wall against love. It's a doorframe that lets love enter without knocking you down. Write your rules where your hands can touch them. Mine says, decide in daylight, no signatures at night, and no disrespect where we bless food. When rooms get loud, touch the wood. Second, grace is not pretending nothing went wrong. Grace names the harm, fixes the board, and still sets the table for whoever arrives with clean hands and daylight. Mercy doesn't erase memory, it repairs it so we can use it. Third, patience is not passivity. Patience is the slow courage to gather witnesses, read every line, and let morning make better eyes. Paper is not suspicion. Paper is memory you can hold. Keep receipts, keep minutes, keep your own voice on the record. Fourth, persistence is the chore nobody applauds. A phone call returned. A clause reworded, a meeting moved into a room with windows. It feels small while you're doing it. Later, you notice the roof stayed up. Fifth, Americanist, the version I love sounds like neighbors who show up, clerks who tap the math, managers who can say, she's right, and pastors who pray with their eyes open. It reads like corrections printed beside Little League scores and checkout notes that say for light. It looks like plows arriving, not because anyone is special, but because everyone is. Sixth, love that asks you to disappear is not love, it's magic that wants your watch and your wallet. Love that lasts will carry half the load, sign its own name, and wait for daylight with you. Seventh, Waiting can be a prayer when words would only stir the storm. Turn the phone face down. Let weather finish a paragraph. Choose the name you must live with over the noise that wants to rush you. If you have to stand alone, stand at your table. The people who know you will recognize you there. Now it's your turn. In the comments, tell me who taught you to wait with courage. Tell me which line you'll tape into your bread tin, and which neighbor you'll invite when it's time to celebrate repair. If this steadied you, subscribe and share it with someone who keeps mistaking kindness for surrender. I'll be here next Sunday at dusk with another grandmother story, plain, American, and grateful to daylight. There's one more story this table could tell if you'll sit with me next Sunday. The church bulletin tucked my name between potlucks and plow schedules, with a line that read, "Persistence with grace." Small letters, large relief. On Main Street, the bank manager lifted 2 fingers from his steering wheel and nodded the way neighbors do when a name has been set back where it belongs. At the market, the new cashier slid a note beneath my receipt. "Proud of you, ma'am," then rang the next customer, as if nothing holy had happened. Online, the thread that once gnawed at me softened its jaw. "I spoke too soon," one wrote. "Learning from her," another typed. A cousin simply posted, "She did right." Hearts tapped like steady thaw from the eaves. The librarian slipped a bookmark into my hand, stamped for light on the stub, and sent me home like I'd borrowed courage after bingo. A veteran tapped the folding table and said, "Good work," as though I had tightened a shared bolt. Even the neighbor who prefers rumors to recipes waved from her porch and asked about the tulips instead of my business. I clipped the correction from the paper, folded it neat, and set it in the bread tin beside the penciled creed that kept this house standing. I rested my palm on the lid and let the room listen. Voices cooled. People disagreed, but fewer shouted. That is its own kind of weather. I poured tea, turned the phone face down, watched sky remember blue. Word traveled farther than I set the table for. Today. Evening forgives, the corners again. I tilt the lamp a finger's width and let the room glow like bread from the oven. I set one bowl at my place and breathe. The second bowl waits upright in the cupboard, patient, not punished, available by choice, not demand. The window holds blue dusk. The porch light clicks on. I rinse the cup from noon and leave it on the towel to dry. Testimony that ordinary is allowed here. Mail rests on the counter until morning, because daylight is the witness that loves me best. The bread tin keeps its arc of index card, correction clipping, apology on letterhead, a pressed tulip petal. I touch the lid and feel steadiness travel up my arm. I speak the house blessing, not as warning, as welcome. Enter kind, speak plain, decide in sun, eat in peace. The stove purrs. Beyond the ridge, the aurora slips from cloud and writes a sentence the sky can read. I stand at the window to see my face become the woman who kept her name. The phone rests face down until morning. If someone asks for hurry after dark, they can ask the light first. I check the lock, not from fear but from respect, and set the broom back where it belongs. The step holds. The room smells of soap and woods, clear and colder, the radio says, and my shoulders agree. Next week, I'll tell you about the map folded inside a postcard with no return address. Kettle ready, tonight, here. If this steadied you, please subscribe, like, and share it with someone who keeps mistaking kindness for surrender. I'm here every Sunday at dusk with another grandmother story, plain American, and told in daylight. Next episode, we open a postcard with no return address, a lighthouse sketched on the front, a folded map inside, and a choice I didn't see coming. Bring your chair, your patience, and your own brave rule. If this gave you courage, come back at dusk, please. **** subscribe next story, at dusk. Thank you. Be good to your neighbors. Porch lights on. Music holds beat.